of that fight, of the Edgar Henderson fight. What do you think about the rest of the lightweight division moving forward?
Well, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before this fight and the pre-fight. It's one of the stacked weight classes in the UFC. I mean, they can go in any direction, and any fighter, the top 5, even top 10, any of those can really challenge for the belt at any time. And I like the Donald Cerrone and the Melvin Guillard fight. Also, I would have to agree with you. Bring Diaz back, fight Showtime, and and the winner of that gets the first shot, because I believe Nate does deserve it, and so does Pettis. And but underneath that, man, you got all those lightweights coming up underneath them. You could almost hold a great tournament style with that weight class, and it would be excellent, because the top 10 are just, any given day, one of the top 10 can win the belt.
And Chael Sonnen kind of took a little bit of exception to this statement. According to the OctagonOnly.com, who we usually use for our rankings, that's how stacked this division is. Is it according to them? These two guys that fought this weekend, Lauzon and Varner, aren't even in the top 10. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Chael Sonnen said he thinks that Joe Lauzon's a top 5 fighter, but he doesn't always show up. So, well, let me take that back. He holds the record for, fight bonuses, so he shows up. I'm just saying he doesn't always beat who he's supposed to. But, this is a very stacked division. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, what do we do with Gray Maynard? Who knows? But I think it makes a lot of sense to have Anthony Pettis fight Nate Diaz. I think Gray Maynard, in terms of the top, I think that Gray Maynard's probably hoping that Benson Henderson wins, because he might be in line next for Benson Henderson, whereas he's already fought Frankie Edgar so many times, we're done seeing that. But I like Pettis and Diaz. Winner gets the winner of Edgar and Henderson, which we've talked about. And then, maybe Maynard gets in there with, a Jim Miller. Maybe he gets the winner or loser of Melvin Guillard, Donald Cerrone. There's some interesting fights in this division. I mean, it really is stacked. Obviously, whatever happens this weekend is going to do a lot to see how this division moves forward. But, we're reaching that point now where the UFC has kind of stockpiled all the talent. There's talk of Eddie Alvarez coming over. I mean, this is a very, very stacked division that could get even more stacked if some guys start to move around. I think if Frankie Edgar loses this weekend, and we'll touch on that when we talk about his fight, maybe 145 is his future. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, if he loses, 145 is probably his future, and I think he could dominate in that weight class as well. If Henderson pulls it out, then there's a couple. I'd like to see a Showtime rematch with him, because that was one of the best moments in WEC, of course, history, but as an MMA period, is that kick off the cage, and if you're being a champ, you definitely want to redeem that, right? So there's a lot of good matchups with it, and with the weight classes going further. Now, the interesting though is if Frankie wins. I mean, you could do it two ways. If Frankie wins, then he gets the Diaz winner, or do you go ahead and have him move to 145? Because in that weight class, Aldo, he's kind of ran through that division, so, could you have a 2-belt champion? Is it 2 weight classes? Possibly so. So there's different ways you could work it out. Either way, either one wins.
And you know what I would like? They'll never do this, but I would love if Frankie won, and then they just vacated the title. It's a stacked enough division that I wouldn't mind seeing like something that's going on with the flyweights, where they just kind of do a little not round robin, but they do a little tournament to kind of decide who the new champion is going to be. I think that makes for some interesting matchups. And Frankie kind of avenges his loss, gets his belt back, goes out on his terms, and then goes to fight Jose Aldo, and he gets paid. If I'm Dana, I can make a lot more money off Frankie Edgar fighting Jose Aldo than I can off Eric Koch. So that's why I think that I would even incentivize Frankie and say, listen, I'll give you a cut of the pay-per-view. I need to see you fighting Jose Aldo. I don't need to see you, recycling fights through. I would rather see Frankie Edgar fight Jose Aldo than I would Nate Diaz or Showtime. I just don't really like, as much as I think he's a great fighter, I don't like Frankie lightweight. I just don't think I don't know his size, or I don't know what it is. I just don't like him matching up with the other guys at 155. It just doesn't interest me.
Right.
So,
No.
So, all right, let's move on. We'll get into really what the whole weekend was about. Ultimately, it was about the